Merry Vlogmas and welcome to the Orange Blossom Special Show. My name is Olivia. Today's episode, we are going to be talking about some of your favorite Christmas movies and some things you may not have known about them. So make sure you hit the subscribe button and let's get started with today's episode. I obviously am a Swiftie, and Taylor Swift, one of the lines is the greatest films of all time have never been made. And Home Alone is such a good example of that because the Home Alone movie was almost never made. And the Home Alone movie, I would say, is probably the most famous Christmas movie of all time. I know that our grandparents' generation, like A Wonderful Life, is their Home Alone, and both are good movies respectively in their own ways. I think it's important to note that. But the thing about Home Alone is Warner Brothers was originally going to be making the movie, and they had a budget cap, and then they basically were going to end up going over budget, and one of the writers went to Fox, got Fox to approve it. Fox said, we'll give you the funding for the budget, whatever you guys need. And Fox ended up pulling it off. They ended up making it that year. It did $476 million in the box office worldwide, which is about $1 billion in today's revenue, which for back then is crazy. So I think that's just a good example. And I am a film fiend and I'm a film fanatic, and I'm 29 now, and I'm at that point where I'm starting to see like more remakes of a lot of films. And I feel like old movies and Christmas movies, it's kind of like a twofold when it comes to doing remakes, because I would say like 90% of the time they're either doing a remake or they're doing a part 2, is so that they don't lose the original rights to the movie, because movie rights, film rights, those all things, like, they wear off after a certain period of time. So I remember growing up and we had the cartoon Grinch, and my dad loved the Grinch. It was his favorite movie, and since my dad has passed, me and my sister, like, it's just crazy the amount of Grinch things that we're now starting to collect because of our dad. And I was around young enough when, I remember like the Jim Carrey remake coming out, and now they recently did another remake of it. Oh my gosh. Oh yeah, no, Universal owns Grinch, because the Grinch is at Universal in Universal World and Resort in in Orlando. Anyway, I digress. So now they recently did a remake of that, and I get it, because it's like, I feel like with moving technology, there's kind of this thing of, okay, does this film need to be updated in today's terms? Like, do we have current technology that can make the movie better? Or is this movie a classic movie and should just be left alone? I think going back to Home Alone, because I think there's 3 Home Alone now, 3 or 4 Home Alones. Let me search this. Okay, I think it goes up to 4. But the original Home Alones 1 and 2 had Kevin McCallister. And I think, yeah, so he only did the first 2, and then they changed it. I think that's one of the issues, is that, like, they could do a new Home Alone movie, and I feel like it would be really funny if he was the dad, but because they've kind of like strayed away from him, I don't necessarily know if it would quote unquote make sense. And I feel like there are some actors who have kind of like strayed away from the old projects that they worked on and wouldn't want to do remakes, and that there are some actors who would want to lean on it. I also feel like too, it's just times when I'm a 90s kid, so the times that we had growing up then were completely different than now. So it's like now you have all of these things. You have like Find My Friends, you have internet security detectors, like you have all this crazy things, stuff in technology, and I feel like a lot of the nostalgia that comes from the 90s and 80s and even like early 2000s movies is the fact that technology was coming out, but it wasn't the technology that we have now, which is crazy. And so it's always interesting to me seeing how they're able to incorporate like the changing world with the newer Christmas movies. And I just feel like there are some things though that like are cult classics. I think, no, what is it? A Christmas Story. They did another one with the original guy who was in it, and it was fine. I thought it was decent, but I just feel like there's this novelty to the old movies that we had growing up that you just can't remake. And I think a lot of it too even just has to deal with the film process and how films were made. Like, it's called film because that's what they shot these things on, was physical film. Now we're in a digital age, and there are some movies that are going back to using film, and there are some that are going digital, and there's just this novelty to watching a movie that was made in film that you just can't get with a digital movie. And I think they both have their purposes, but like the old ways of like animation and cartoon are completely like, those are done. And so as we have technology, we enter like a new age with the film making process. And I think that's equally important to note. And like, I would say, I don't know if I would. I've been watching National Lampoon's Christmas Vacation. I've been watching that movie a lot. Weirdly enough, I feel like I really didn't watch that movie much growing up. I feel like growing up, my go-to movies were always Elf, Home Alone 2, specifically Home Alone 2 because he's in New York, and I can't believe that I lived in New York City and that ended up happening. But anyway, I digress. Elf, Home Alone 2, and I feel like there's like another Christmas movie that it's just blanking on me. I guess I could say The Grinch, but I feel like I would always lean more towards either Home Alone 2 or Elf. Those are the top two contenders for me when it comes to those are the top two contenders for me specifically when it comes to movies and when it comes to Christmas movies. And everyone is different. And you know what it is? It's Santa Claus, I think, is it 2 or is it 3? We're going to see. It's Santa Claus 2. But Elf and Home Alone 2 were always like my top two. And then Santa Claus 2, I feel like was always on TV growing up. And then I would say Christmas Vacation. And then the rest of them, I feel like are just kind of, I don't say like they're meh. I mean, I do watch The Grinch, but we had like, obviously when I was a kid, that's when we had these things called DVDs, and you couldn't go on Netflix or Hulu or whatever streaming service you were. You had to go and watch these things on like DVDs. And so you were lucky if your favorite movie was like on around Christmas time. And so you really had to like pick. I mean, I guess a lot of people had like different types of movies and DVDs and stuff, but you really like, you had 3 Christmas movies and you just watched those 3 Christmas movies until you were tired of watching them. And then now we have, 800 million subscription services. So you can basically watch whatever you want when you want. But I feel like there's this novelty too of like having cable TV or whatever and like seeing a movie that you actually want to watch on. And that's pretty fine and dandy too. But kids these days will never know the struggle. And then my parents would say, you guys are lucky. Like we didn't have DVDs growing up. You had to sit and hope that the antenna worked and someone would like be holding the antenna up, and props if you knew how to rig the system and hook onto someone else's like satellite or whatever it was, because we didn't have that. I don't know if I don't know when VHS cassette tapes ran out. I know that they were in the 90s, so maybe they were like in the 80s, but it's parents would be like, kids these days, now I'm 29 and I'm like, kids these days don't know the struggle. And I feel like the novelty of Christmas back then, I feel like one of the key factors, one was about the fact that it was still very much a thing. Like you went to the movie theaters and you watched your favorite Christmas movies. You went to the dollar theater and you watched the Christmas movies. And the Christmas movies growing up during my time, I feel like were really goated, by the way. And I have watched some of the newer Christmas movies come out, but I feel like I haven't really been like amazed by some of the newer Christmas movies that have come out. And maybe that's just me getting older. I don't know. But I think that like the 90s generation, I feel like we were just so lucky because you were either like on the older end and you were a little bit older when Home Alone and those movies like started being made, or you're on my end, like I'm like a 95 kid. So like I remember being in elementary school when like the Polar Express came out. I had to ask my friend the other day, I was like, wait, did Elf come out when we were in like high school or middle school? Because I don't remember it being out when we were in elementary school. It came out when we were in middle school. I was like, see, goated holiday movies. I was around when Christmas, like Santa Claus 2 came out and Santa Claus 3 came out. And so I feel like us 90s kids, we were really the hashtag blessed ones when it came to Christmas movies being made and Christmas movies coming out. And I just think, again, there's novelty. Yeah, Home Alone came out in 1990. Again, I digress. So I just feel like there's like this novelty with like that time period and the cinema / movies compared to now. Like Wicked is coming out and in like a week you're going to be able to watch Wicked on Prime or rent it or whatever. And I just feel like back then, like the novelty of Christmas movies coming out was like going and watching them in theaters and in like the dollar theaters, and knowing that like it actually cost something to have to go and get them and rent the movies. Like you had to go to Blockbuster and hope that the movie hadn't been rented yet and that someone actually rewinded the cassette tape. That's another thing too, is having to rewind the cassette tapes at Blockbuster. And then they would be like, make sure you rewound it. And when you got there, they would have a thing where you could like pull it in and it would like rewind it for you. So again, just movies, life, everything has changed so much. And I feel like there is a novelty you can create for kids around the holidays now, but again, it's just different. It's just different. I feel like as you get older, and as Buddy the Elf always says, like, the best way to spread Christmas cheer is singing on for Huddle to hear. I'm not going to sing for you, but I am going to just suggest that you go and watch some Christmas movies and you put some of your own little magic into Christmas or the holidays this year, whichever you choose. May your